Well, first of all, I'm just going to start out and say it's an absolute pleasure to speak with you, and thank you again for agreeing to have this conversation with us. The work that you've both done is phenomenal, and we're just really excited to amplify it. So, starting easy, let's start with who we are, and it'd be lovely if you wouldn't mind sharing your name, your company, your role, your particular passion for DE&I, and for Damita and Jocelyn, how you got involved with the Antiracism Toolkit for organizations. I think that would be a particularly interesting point to start. So I wonder, Damita, if you wouldn't mind kicking us off.
Sure. My name is Damita Snow. I am the Senior Manager of Publishing Technologies at the American Society of Civil Engineers. I got involved with the Antiracism Toolkit for Organizations because I received an email from Jaquelyn Dawson. And I thought, and once I spoke to Jocelyn, I thought it was such a needed resource and I was excited about it. And so I'm just pleased that she reached out to me and happy to be a part of it.
That's so awesome. And also, I'm not going to let you off the hook because you have been doing a lot of work within diversity, equity, and inclusion, especially within the scholarly communications field and world, because I know that you're really active within SSP. Would you mind just saying a little bit more about that and what you're interested in?
Sure. You know, I was always interested in, equitable processes and inclusiveness because, as we all know, it's a benefit to all of us to have a diverse group of folks in any particular meeting or setting. I am a founder of the Diversity and Inclusion Council at my organization, ASCE, along with a few other folks. We created this group. I co-chair the DEI committee for SSP, as you mentioned, and I took that on. I was asked to do that, and I took that on after the committee, it became a committee from a task force. I must mention Nick Dormer and Rebecca McLeod as the two founders of that group. They are fantastic. So I co-chair currently with Sabi Kaur and Shavi Shahan. So yeah, we have a great group of folks on our committee. So it's exciting.
That's awesome. Yeah. It's a really great conversation that you have been kicking off. So I think it's important actually that we highlight this as well. And Jocelyn, again, back over to you. Name, company, and role, your passion for DE&I, and how you got involved in the Antiracism Toolkit.
Sure. My name is Jaquelyn Dawson, and I'm at Duke University Press, where I'm the Journals and Collections Marketing Manager. And I got involved with equity and inclusion work through Duke University Press. We had a really active E&I group kick off a number of years ago, and I was really inspired to see that work expand into the larger scholarly communications community. I've been on the SSP DE&I committee with Damita under her leadership, and it's been really wonderful to see the network of folks that have grown through that committee and the way the meeting has changed over the years. I think it feels like a more welcoming and inclusive space because in large part of the work that Damita and her co-chairs have done. I got involved with the Antiracism Toolkits as one of the founding organizers. There were 4 of us who started the Toolkit for Allies. In 2019, the project was kicked off at the Triangle Scholarly Communications Institute, which is a Mellon-funded sort of week-long incubation space. And at that time, we thought we were going to just crank out 3 toolkits and put them out into the world. It's been now a several years long effort that's been able to pull in dozens of people across the industry and it's really taken on a life of its own. So that's been a really exciting part of this project for me.
That's fantastic. And again, it's so wonderful to highlight both of you in your work. Very quickly, so my name is Laura Martin, and I am a program manager effectively at Wiley. So I deal in business change, and my passion for DE&I is that it just felt obvious. I transitioned into academic publishing 9 years ago and was always in strategy and operations. And inclusion was such a big component of what made change successful. And the DE&I conversations that have picked up, especially in the last few years, made so much sense to me. And I've often talked internally within my companies around what we do in order to bring people in to the decision-making space and also to set them up for success once they're there. It just makes so much sense to have different viewpoints, especially because we serve so many different people, and actually the flavors of those identities make us special because we're solving problems for those customers. Megan?
Yeah. Hi, my name's Megan Seiler. My pronouns are she, her, hers, and I am a senior journal publishing assistant at Wiley. I also help to co-found the Medford DE&I committee, so it's like our Boston office, which has now expanded to sort of include all of our East Coast offices, so Hoboken as well, which is really exciting. And I'm also a member of C4DISC's Communications and Outreach Committee. And I got involved with DE&I work, I think primarily because, especially as a more junior level colleague and as a white colleague, I feel I have a really good opportunity and the time and the obligation to help sort of shape and improve the industry that I'm a part of and that I'll be, working in every day for quite some time. I think there's definitely a lot of work to be done, which is why I'm really excited to be working with C4DISC and just supporting the work that the coalition has been doing, like this toolkit.
I think it's awesome. And what I'd love is to go back in terms of the Antiracism Toolkit. Jocelyn and Damita, why should people check out this toolkit?
So the toolkit is worth checking out because it's the collaborative effort of people across organizations. We have people from the large commercial publishers, from university presses, from small society publishers, from libraries, and we're all taking the work that we're doing in equity and inclusion at our own organizations and figuring out what worked, what didn't, and sort of distilling that into lessons learned for the wider community. So if you want to check out a list of the types of programming that other E&I groups are doing, or what affinity groups exist at other organizations, there's resource lists with those. But then we also try and cover some of the large concepts in anti-racism in a way that applies them to scholarly publishing and some of the distinct problems that we have in our field. So that's how I would describe the sort of unique benefits of the toolkit.
I love it. Thank you so much. And Damita, with the work that you've done on the toolkit, what are you most excited about?
I want to hear from people on how they will incorporate the toolkit into the processes of their organizations. I want to know what they are most excited about after they read it. We've included case studies, infographics, illustrations, and an extensive list of resources to provide further guidance, and expect that there is something in the toolkit that everyone can use.
That's awesome. And Jocelyn, what is the status of the toolkits? You'd mentioned previously that a few of them are still in works. When might users be able to access them, and what's available now?
Sure. The Anti-Racism Toolkit for Allies launched last August. We've had, I think, over 4,000 downloads to this point, which has just been really outstanding and inspiring. And the toolkit for organizations is going to launch in late August, and that's been the product of the work of dozens of collaborators, and we're really excited to be bringing that to the community in late August. And then we have a third toolkit, the toolkit for Black, Indigenous, and people of color. That is, it'll be the third in the series, and so I would expect that maybe in early 2022. And then the toolkits have had some spin-offs. So there's a toolkit around disability and a toolkit around inclusive language that we'll see coming out from C4DISC in the years ahead as well.
Well, that sounds really exciting. Thank you.
That sounds great. Damita, I was looking through the toolkit draft this morning, and it's quite a long document. So I was hoping, could you give some insight into the preparation and what the workload looked like a little bit to create these toolkits?
Sure. So initially, a call for volunteers went out to members for assistance with the project, and we received an overwhelming response from a great group of people. Initially, Jocelyn and I crowdsourced with the volunteers for ideas of what they would like to see in the toolkit. Once completed, we reviewed everyone's ideas, and we were fortunate to have a volunteer work with us to organize the responses. The toolkit is rather extensive right now. It was even longer, but we then decided to parse out some of the work to writers, readers, reviewers, copyeditors, etc. We used an open source software to organize the document, and we worked within a particular platform, PubHub platform. It was great. We had someone on our volunteer team who set it up and provided instruction throughout the entire project. I have to give a shout out to DeWitt Tegbaru. He was great. We also had a liaison with George Washington University's publishing program, and he took on some unforeseen tasks. That was Gabe Hart. And, as I said, we had a fantastic group of people working on this document, but I certainly can't name everyone, but, they were fantastic.
Yeah, like Damita said, the George Washington Masters in Publishing program was involved in this toolkit. They hadn't been involved in the first one, but they reached out to us and we connected to have students work on providing sort of a peer review for this toolkit in addition to other volunteers from our community. And so I think that was a real, kind of nice way that this toolkit differs from the previous ones. We have the point of view of folks who may be new to the industry. And are just kind of getting their first taste, and so having their feedback on the toolkit was really terrific.
Jocelyn, you already spoke a little bit about this in terms of why you think the toolkit is an important resource, but I was wondering, how do you hope this toolkit will, help people in the industry or the industry itself?
We recently were shortlisted for the ALPSP Innovation Award, and they had a similar question. And it's really hard to identify the ways in which our toolkit will make an intervention that are distinct from the other DEI efforts that are happening in the industry and the work, say, of the Society for Scholarly Publishing DEI Committee and all the changes that are happening. I think we're really fortunate to be at a moment where a lot of people are aware of the huge problem in scholarly publishing, where we do have surveys showing that the field is 79% white or maybe even 91% white. So we have a lot of people who are working on the problem, which is really, really great. So we hope that our toolkit's sort of unique intervention is to provide some real actionable steps that are really founded in anti-racism, in an anti-racism framework. So a little bit distinct from general DEI, which can sometimes be a little bit watered down or emphasize the business case for diversity. We really wanted to put social justice and anti-racism at the forefront and to make that the foundation of everything that we did. So I think making sure that we had people on our project that shared that mentality was something that really allowed us to present the strongest possible ideas and work in this area.
That's a really interesting point, Jocelyn. And actually, the toolkit emphasizes that shift from diversity to anti-racism, noting that DE&I efforts can be a means to an anti-racist end, but often doesn't go far enough. I wonder if you could speak a little bit to that.
Sure. So when we think about anti-racism in scholarly publishing as opposed to DEI and scholarly publishing, we're talking about actual policies and procedures that need to change. So rather than a DEI focus where you might have some training, some general learning that's happening at your organization, which is all good, an actual anti-racist approach would mean that you're looking at your hiring policies, you're making equity and inclusion work, you're making sure that that's a part of your performance evaluation system, you're making sure your internships are paid, you're making policy changes. And so I think that making sure that we're putting budget behind this, putting staff resources behind this, and that we're also not putting it on the shoulders of our BIPOC colleagues, that it's work that everyone is doing is really, really important to making sure that we're all transforming our own organizations in addition to the industry at large. Yeah, Damita, what would you add to that?
I would add that we do realize that we're not able to touch on every topic. We realize, we do note that it is not an all-encompassing toolkit, but we did our best to bring forth information that we think is useful to any organization, no matter where they are in their DEI anti-racism framework journey.
Are you currently working on any similar projects that you want to make our audience aware of?
Well, during the writing of the toolkit, I was taking a class called DEI in the Workplace from the University of South Florida, and I have to tell you that was super helpful in some of the writing that I did for the toolkit, and it helped me broaden some of the ideas that I had for the toolkit. As far as similar projects go, I'm on the committee to create guidelines for inclusive language and images in scholarly communications. Jocelyn mentioned that group previously. And again, that committee is also a part of the C4DISC community. So I'm excited about that.
That sounds awesome. And back to this particular toolkit, because it is so big, is there a key kind of start point that you would recommend users to begin with when looking to access it?
Wow. I think it all depends on where you are in your journey. I think it all depends on what you need to do, what your next steps are, what the next steps of the organizations determine, they need to work on.
Yeah, and I think one thing we found in talking to our large group of volunteers was that the responsibilities for these efforts live all over the place. We have a whole section that details what the setup is at Wiley, what the setup is at Columbia University Press, what the setup is at Purdue University Library. So we have like a range of places where the responsibility can live. Some places have it in their HR department. Some efforts are coming from the CEO or director. Some efforts are staff-led. So we really intended for this guide to not be for organizations in the way that it has to be given to the folks at the top of the hierarchy. We intend for it to be for anyone who's interested in organizational change. And like Damita said, there's different parts that will match to people's interests. So a large organization might have the resources to really dive into measurement and metrics and audit their efforts, to take demographic surveys and do that sort of thing. Where there might be a smaller 4-person publisher who wants a reading list of suggested readings on anti-racism. So so we're really hoping that we can provide just a range for different levels of people within the organization and for different organizational sizes, because within our industry you really do run the gamut of organizational size.
Yeah, that's a really excellent point actually to make for people who are looking to access it, because as we talked about, you mentioned organizational change and anyone who's interested in it. I'm a big believer that anyone can lead change, no matter their placement within the organization. They will always have challenges, even if they are at the top. There will be challenges to unravel and chase. So it's really helpful that you've clearly signposted that this is for everyone, and it doesn't matter where they are in the organization, what size the organization is, that there is an entry point for every reader.
Yeah, so, it's interesting, because I do think one of the obstacles to equity and inclusion work within our industry is that it's not in a lot of folks' job titles. And I think my colleague Nicole Coggins has said that when you're in an industry that has a lot of perfectionists, people want to make sure that they are doing things the right way. And so having a toolkit might be useful for that. But I think it also can kind of stymie folks if they think, I'm not an expert in DE&I, like, should I be leading a group of my organization? And I would say that, the co-organizers of the first Toolkit for Allies and I, none of us were experts. We've done some trainings, but, it was a learning process for us. Like, all of us are publishing professionals. just like most of the people watching this video are. And we have followed Damita's sort of idea of stumbling forward. She's said several times, we know we're not going to do this work perfectly, but somebody's got to do it. So so just really kind of pushing ourselves out of our comfort zone, and hopefully not providing inaccurate information or pretending to have expertise we don't have, but just approaching it as something that we're all learning together.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I've been chairing the D&I Council at ASCE for 7 years. And so I've read a lot, I've experienced a lot, I learned from other people, and I always hope to learn something new every day. So there is no endpoint in, the DEI anti-racism framework. This is something that I strive to learn more about daily. Learn from other people, read, have conversations like we're having right now. And I've had some interesting conversations with people that I did not expect to have particular conversations with. I was talking to a colleague, and Jocelyn has heard me mention this on another call, and I had sent out the Antiracism Toolkit for allies out to a group of folks. And one individual came back to me and said, I didn't realize, this is a white male. He said, I didn't realize that I was not expanding my network. I was not including people in my network that didn't look like me. So that's one of the goals of these toolkits, is to make people realize, hey, I'm not doing anything intentional, but I need to be more mindful of some of the actions that I'm taking, and pay attention to that and see what I can do better, just do better.
Yeah, I think that's a really great point. I feel like these toolkits offer so much. And like you said, Jocelyn, I feel like the fear of getting it wrong stops a lot of people from moving forward. So I think these toolkits offer a great guide for that, and sort of, helping people along in their journeys, and, having some clear next steps that they can take will be really helpful. I had another little bonus question that I was hoping I could throw in. But I think when I was reading through the toolkit, something that I think is important that the toolkit discusses is the notion of performative action. And I think this was a quote from the toolkit, but asking, is my organization genuinely recognizing the existence of white supremacy within our structure, or are we responding to the cultural moment? And so I wanted to know, how do you think this toolkit can help organizations shift or identify from potentially performative behavior to more authentic change?
I think that, and I'll go back to George Floyd, his murder. I think that a lot of organizations, corporations wanted to make a comment to that moment, make a stand, and they came out with statements. And I think that maybe some got stuck. They made the statement and didn't know what next step they could take, or thought that that particular statement would suffice for some reason. So I think that the toolkit will help them with maybe some next steps. Give them some insight as to how a performative act is not helpful in any situation. So I sum it all up, I would just say that it will help people give them next steps, and also educate.
And also the fact that the toolkit, that there's so much content in it, I think shows that it's not just a simple box that can be checked or something that we're going to accomplish in Q3 of our roadmap. Like, it's going to be this ongoing work that we have to do for our organizations to stay relevant. And yeah, that kind of question of relevance was something that many of our volunteers brought up. Like, if we want to continue to attract the best people to our industry, to serve our readers, to serve our authors and our editors, we need to make sure that we are doing this work alongside our day jobs. And so, yes, I hope that organizations will make space for that in people's jobs. We've seen organizations say that staff can spend a certain number of hours a month, or organizations set budgets, but just prioritizing this work, making, as I mentioned before, making it part of people's performance evaluations, so that people, if they see it as something that they are going to be held responsible for when they when they are evaluated at their job, if they, to apply an equity lens to the different parts of their job. So that's one way I would think that we could sort of make that shift away from merely performative actions.
You mentioned the Toolkit for Allies is already out, and then the Toolkit for Organizations will be launching in August. What can readers and listeners to this do today to support these toolkits for equity?
Yeah, so I would say go to the C4DISC website, and you can download the first toolkit, and and I think share it, and share it even outside the industry. We've had folks from other parts of higher education or other types of societies that have nothing to do with publishing find that they're useful. So so I think just finding ways to do the work, and there's so many different avenues to do that outside of our toolkit.
I just want to say that we had an excellent group of volunteers who put their hearts and soul into this project. I certainly thank them for all of their hard work and many insightful questions that they had throughout this project. I do want to thank C4DISC for their support, as well as the students and teachers from George Washington University's publishing program. So I did want to make sure that that was included.
Thank you.
And I'd like to acknowledge the three co-organizers of the Toolkit for Allies, Melanie Dalachek, Nicole Coggins, and Gisela Fasado, who helped us build this framework for the project. And our work builds on a model that was developed by the AAM, which I think is the American Alliance of Museums. They had a task force develop a series of toolkits around supporting trans individuals in the workplace. They had one for transitioning professionals, one for organizations, and one for colleagues. And we built our model on their work. And so we really encourage people to check out their guides. They're just as relevant for publishing as they are for museums. So so thank you to the AAM for that work.
That's great. Well, a very big thank you to both of you for this conversation, and also for amplifying the work of the team that supported you for this. I think that's really fantastic. And I will merely end with saying, we talked earlier about visibility, and I think it's really important to have visible role models and people who are speaking about this and agitating for change, because by doing so, you embolden others, especially in organizations where the culture might be to not call these things out. So by being brave and being bold, you set the example for others, and that takes a lot for someone to do. So a really big thank you for doing that.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for the conversation.